Congratulations to you. A happy day. Thank you for spending it with your church family here at the church. God continue to bless you with many, many more. Brothers and sisters, we are continuing a series of sermons. It's called Shape Up. We started talking about shaping up right after the end of the holidays, didn't we? When, all those holiday extras had been consumed. All those sweets, all those candies, all those delectables. Right? It made great sense to talk about shaping up. Well, now it's the end of January. And it's not so challenging anymore. It's starting to get a little annoying even to me. It seems to be requiring a bit of me. That's okay. I'll be up for the challenge. Those of you who are visiting, those of you who might not have caught every message in this series of sermons, please know that there's a teaching moment around that. And that is the fact that we're having a 5-kilometer, that's a 3.2-mile road race. And it's going to be this Saturday at 7:30, January 31st. It's going to be at Memorial Park. Come along. Suit up. Not too late to get involved in it. And I hope you will. I've got a whole week to get in shape. And I'm going to do it. All this also is a fundraiser. Why? Because we are the church that's going to be sponsoring the Wind Shape Camp this summer, June 8th through 12th. We're part of we've received essentially the rights to sponsor this camp from the Wind Shape Foundation. And that means that we're going to have a Christian-based camp come to our town for a week. Really looking forward to that. I remember having to travel all the way to North Georgia for me to go to camp, and when I went for 6 weeks at a pop. Now one comes here for a week, a day camp. And all the things that I used to do at camp, they're doing here for a week. It's coming to the community. The camp I went to, we learned how to, archery was my favorite thing, learned how to shoot bows and arrows. They'll be doing that here too. At the camp I went to, you just kept score, and at the end of the day, whoever had the highest score kind of spread it around for the rest of the day. But at the Wind Shape Camp, when you shoot arrows and you miss the target, they'll talk to you about how sin is missing the mark. They'll make an object lesson out of everything. It just points the young people, points the children to Christ. So I'm really looking forward to that coming here. We need to be able to provide 15 classrooms. We don't have that. We have to rent the J.D. Parker Elementary School. That comes at quite a price tag. It's just under $21,000 for the week. So that's why we're having a fundraiser. And that's why it might not be a bad idea for you to get people to sign up for the road race. Thank you for keeping that in front of people like that. Now, back to shaping up. Back to that run. Back to that road race. Because I've been the spokesperson for it. I'm the one who's been talking about it. And I've been spokespersoning for it so much, I've been talking about it so much. Guess what I haven't been doing? There's a part of me that says I should be the MC there. I should show up in a coat and tie. I should show up in leather shoes so I'll have an excuse not to run. I know what I'll do. I'll greet everyone that comes in and I'll thank them. But I've been talking about it too much. I got to participate in it. I really did. Don't know that I'm ready for it. I just don't know that I am. I'm wondering if I'll be able to finish. I know what I should do. I should call people out. I should challenge them. And maybe see if I can pace myself ahead of them. But then I think, man, I'm set up to make a fool of myself. No one wants to do that. What am I going to do about running this whole thing? Because game day is going to be Saturday morning. here I'm talking about shaping up for it, and I've been working so hard on coming up with sermons for shaping up. I've neglected to get myself in shape. Brothers and sisters, that creates a tension. That creates a tension. And let me ask you a question. What are you the spokesperson for in your life? Lately, I've been a spokesperson for a race. But what are you the spokesperson for in your life? What have you been promoting? Who have you been promoting? For who have you been an ambassador? Who are you standing for? And while I've been a spokesperson for a race, I'm also a spokesperson for Jesus Christ. And I don't do that because I'm a professional, ordained, and credentialed clergyman. You too have that in common with me. You are a spokesperson for Jesus Christ. You're aligned with him. You might say, I don't want to say a word on his behalf. Guess what? You're still a spokesperson for Jesus Christ. So my tension when I think about running a race, when I think about being a spokesperson for Jesus Christ, I need to ask, am I committed to what I stand for? Because pretty soon, come race day, it's going to be there for all to see. You ever been kind of backed into a corner like I am, or at least feel that way? Didn't you? I mean, because I'm going to talk about this for the next 20 minutes, and if you aren't asking the same question, then I'm going to be answering a question you're not asking. Have your convictions ever been placed on the line? What you speak for ever been placed on the line? Let's talk about that. And again, we're talking about running races, but we're also talking about shaping up spiritually, being spiritually fit. By the way, one of the guides that we've used to talk about that is a book called The Practice of the Presence of God, written by a monk by the name of Brother Lawrence from the 1600s. A lot of you, even people today, what was the name of that book again? One of the members of the church bought 200 of these. If you're serious about reading them, because the 8 o'clock and the 11 o'clock service from last week's got a head start on you, we have a generous handful of these, a couple baskets full. If anyone's going to read it, it's waiting for you right out there. Anyone want this copy? Yeah. Holly, gosh, I saw you first. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, everybody else. You're going to read it? Absolutely. Wait until after the sermon. Thank you. We're talking about running a race. We're talking about being fit for a spiritual race. Let's go to the truth in God's Word and get some advice for finishing both. These are the words of the Apostle Paul that he was writing to a young believer in his life that he was mentoring for the last couple of years of his life. You need to know Paul was under house arrest. He was going to be kept there for the rest of his life, and he knew it. And he knew his life wouldn't be lived that much longer. And from that perspective, he wrote these words to Timothy. I'm going to ask you to read them with me. For I am already being poured out like a drink offering, and the time for my departure is near. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day. And not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing. God bless the reading, the preaching, the hearing of his holy word. More importantly than these, may God bless the living, the celebratory living of his holy word. Wow. Here's Paul. at the end of his life, in jail, in chains, incarcerated, in the big house. Not a whole lot to enjoy. Not a great view. Alone with his thoughts. Have I made a difference in this life? Have I made a significant splash in it? Have I affected people? And is Jesus Christ, is his passion, was his passion, is our passion, and forevermore shall be his passion. He's asking, have I made a splash for Jesus Christ? So what does he do? He picks up paper and quill. And he writes a letter to someone he's mentoring, someone he's guiding, someone he's pouring his life into. What a beautiful thing that is. I hope we'll always be on the lookout for the people who are new. Especially those of you who have been Christians for over half your life. You might not be experts on the Bible, but you know how to walk with Jesus. You know how to be guided. You know the fact that he's a good shepherd. And you know the fact that his rod and his staff will comfort you. I hope every one of us will dedicate ourselves to being those kind of mentors, looking for those people who are new, curious, testing the waters, finding their way. Paul obviously did make a splash. He said, I know I made a splash in Timothy's life, so I will write him. And he goes on to say, by the way, when I talk about knowing the end of life, these guys are a bunch of farmers from a long time farming family out in Pahokee. And the patriarch of that family is right there. That's Mel Spooner. Mel Spooner lived all of his life out in Pahokee, and relatively recently, within the last handful of years, moved here to Stuart and became very active here in the church. Always stayed in touch with his home community, being Pahokee. Mel ran on to the Father's house at the end of this past week, and ran victoriously. Really desired to get back into the Father's house. And Mel had grown up a farmer out there in Pahokee. Grew up very close to the earth. And he grew sugar cane, and grew corn, and grew a whole bunch of other things. And if you were around him very long, you'd hear him talk about the kind of things he grew. And Mel didn't just grow food, he cooked it. Let me tell you, he cooked it. He was trained up by the best cooks of Pahokee. I call it Florida Cracker Gourmet. Seriously, every time I've gone up there to Pahokee, I have dined well. And when Mel got involved in the church, on Tuesday nights we'd feed the homeless community. We fed them from a soup kitchen. But when Mel got hold of it, it became gourmet. And he'd bring all these fresh vegetables from his Pahokee farms. And he'd bring them there to the kitchen. And boy, we'd eat fresh lettuce, fresh vegetables. Wonderful stuff. Not only us, but the homeless community on Tuesday night and the entire church community on Wednesday night. It really spoiled us. And he wasn't just touching our church. They said every kitchen between Pahokee and here, he'd stop off and bless them with the latest pickings and gleanings, the latest harvest from his farm. Wasn't that great? Mel was not one of those spotlight-seeking people. He made this huge difference behind the scenes. He just blessed with what he had. He was at home getting hospice care during his last week of life, and Dee Blunt went over to see him. There he was, and he barely lifted his head. but he visited with her as best as he could. His strength was dwindling. He was weak. But when it came time to leave, he said, "Dee, pick yourself up some cabbage before you leave." I love him for that. I really do. When I went by to see him this past week, I saw that sign that he usually had in his yard, and it said guava jelly. And that's because he'd go out there into the scrubs and pick guava, and he'd fix it up in a jelly, and he did it by the vat. And just a way that he could share and bless you. And so, it didn't surprise us that when I went by to see him this past week, there was his guava jellies sitting there. And one of the guys that worked in the kitchen, usually is here in worship, when Larry Anderson walked up to Mel not too long ago. Mel, he said, "Mel, what is this guava?" He said, "You need to know, I'm a Minnesota banker, retired. I don't know what guava is, whatever it is you call it." And Mel said, "Tell you what, Larry, I'm going to go take you to get some guava." So he said, "I'm going to come by your house at 6 o'clock in the morning," which for Mel was sleeping late. And so he went by and he picked up Larry and he drove him all the way out to Pahokee. And as they were driving along, he says, "Well, before we get guava, we need to stop by and see the boys." Went to his favorite diner restaurant. It happened to be closed, uncharacteristic, but so he missed breakfast and missed the boys. And then Mel said, "Well, I'll tell you what, while I got you here, let me show you the first house I lived in." And sure enough, he showed him his old house and talked about how poor he was. So let me show you the church I went to, which was the Pahokee Methodist Church. Yeah, I used to go here barefooted. I think he went everywhere that way. I think everyone in Pahokee did that way. And he said, "Let me show you the first house we had when we were married, the last house we lived in." And sure enough, took him. And Larry told me, he said, everywhere along the way, he stopped and spoke to people. And he said, "I soon figured out, Mel, everyone knows him in that town, and he knows everybody else." And finally said, Mel said, "Let me just show you some of the farms. I need to go check on a few things." And he even went out to one of the sugarcane patches, got his machete out, chopped some cane, and got all the husks off of it, diced it all up, and said, "Here, Larry, chew on it. Floridians grow up on this stuff. Here." Larry took it, and his Minnesota way went, "Wow, there really is sugar in this." Then Mel said, "Let me talk to some of the guys who work with me. I need to get caught up on how the fields are doing and things like that." They actually found a few guava trees, two of his favorite ones, I'll have you know. And finally Larry said, "Mel, we haven't had breakfast yet. I'm really hungry." He said, "Can we go get some? I'll pay for it." Mel said, yeah, but there's one more place we got to go first. One more place where I have to go." And they drove off to Port Mayaca, and they went to the cemetery. He said, "I need to go see my wife." And he and Mel walked over there to the cemetery, and they sat there for a while. Mel prayed, and then Larry prayed. As soon as they finished, Mel knelt down next to the tombstone and he whispered, "Happy birthday." And then he said to his wife's grave, "I won't be long. I won't be long." Mel knew that his time here would not be long. He knew that his health had been compromised. He knew there was nothing else that could be done. And so did he go backwards? Or did he quit? Or did he rest on laurels? And the answer to that is no, he kept on living his life. He kept on doing the things that he always did. And that's why, as long as he had breath, he was still giving away vegetables to people. Which was Mel's way of saying, "I love you, I value you, you mean so much to me." Mel kept on living his life. Paul, when he came to the end of his life and knew that his days wouldn't be much longer, he wrote to Timothy and said, "My life is being poured poured out like a drink offering. It's being expended. And instead of being measured now by the cup, it's really being measured by the drops. Our lives are being poured out. And may they be poured out in these difference-making ways, these beneficial ways, these constructive ways, these making a difference in the world kinds of ways. Our lives are being poured out like a drink offering. But when Paul tried his best to sum up what he wanted to do, even with his last bit of life, he looked it over and said, what can I say I've done? He said, I've fought the good fight. Let's talk about fighting the good fight. Because if we're Christians of any kind of measurable caliber at all, then we're involved in a fight. And I know it, please don't write me letters about all violent imagery and things like that. We're in a fight. We're in a fight. To ignore that's to our detriment. We have an enemy that's committed to bringing us down, to getting us so far off course, becoming so dissatisfied and bitter to the way, truth, and the life that our spiritual train wreck would delight in. We're involved in a fight. Paul acknowledged that fight, and even said, I've been involved in it. And by the grace and the empowerment of the Holy Spirit of Jesus Christ, I've done well. It's not the way I've fought so much, but I've fought through Jesus. Can I tell you some other ways I'm going to fight? I'm going to fight against me. We're talking about going deeper and deeper into God's presence. That takes a struggle too. It takes if I ever sit still and all of a sudden, man, all the things I need to do today. Wow. Or you really start to concentrate on the grace of Jesus Christ. You start to focus on that, and the next thing you know, you're thinking about the agenda of that meeting you have to go to later in the afternoon. How did my mind get from something so good to something so menial? It's a fight. It's a war. It's a struggle. Paul said, due to the grace, due to the empowerment of Jesus Christ, I've fought the good fight. And that measures right up to the rest of the testimony of Scripture. Read it with me. Therefore, put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. And after you have done everything, to stand. Man, life's going to knock you down. But empowered and dressed in the spiritual armor, standing. Is it going to knock you down? Yes.